Do your due diligence and research. That's the way you dodge all these bullets coming your way. Understanding how GABA works in the brain. It is an amino acid that regulates the autonomic nervous system, which maintains balance between the parasympathetic and sympathetic fight or flight nervous system. GABA and glutamate balance each other. So, if GABA is low, then glutamate is high. GABA, being the opposite of glutamate, has the following functions. It calms down the brain, slows down racing feelings, relaxes the body, increases production in the brain of alpha waves, slow brain waves that produce a reflective meditative state, is needed for speech and language production, comprehension, conversation, and the pause and space between words. Maintains healthy levels of IgA, antibodies that protect the gut, and other mucous linings from harmful foreign toxic matter, which supports a healthy immune system and prevents a leaky gut, with food sensitivities and intolerances. Is needed for action for the pituitary, which regulates sleep, and HPA axis, which regulates stress response. Decreased levels of GABA may cause slurred or stuttering speech, loss of speech, abnormal responses to tactile stimuli, hypersensitivity to loud noises, motor impairments, anxiety, panic disorders, aggressive behaviors, decreased eye contact, antisocial behavior, attention deficits, eye focusing towards the nose, GERD, as in acid reflux, sugar and carb cravings, adrenal fatigue, insomnia, chemical sensitivities, chronic fatigue syndrome. Researchers have found that children with autism have less GABA in the motor cortex and the auditory cortex, which accounts for the sensory abnormalities found in children with autism. And for that matter, I assume adults as well. They always forget the adults. GABA receptors are found in the gastrointestinal tract and are important for bowel contraction to avoid constipation, abdominal pain, and impaired transit. GABA is found in almost every area of the brain and in very high levels in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus requires GABA production to regulate sleep, regulate appetite, regulate body temperature, regulate thirst, regulate sexual arousal and desire. GABA and glutamate must be balanced. We cannot talk about glutamates without understanding about GABA and how important a balance between both neurotransmitters is necessary for appropriate brain function. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter, while GABA is an inhibitory transmitter. Both the nervous system and the neurological system are severely impacted if there is excessive glutamate in relation to GABA. Excessive glutamates, which come primarily from one's diet, can overstimulate the nervous system and produce adverse neurological symptoms, which affect mood, energy levels, mental stability, speech, behaviors, motor skills, sleep, resilience, hormonal functioning. When the immune system is compromised and not functioning properly, then a GABA glutamate imbalance becomes more pronounced and problematic. Low glutamate diet. Conditions associated with high free glutamates. The problem with glutamate. As important as glutamate is for brain functioning, it is also a double-edged sword. In the brain, glutamate is one of the most destructive compounds in the brain, but only when it is found in excess outside of brain cells. This means eating foods high in free glutamate will cause the excess glutamate to remain outside of brain cells. The brain tries to maintain a low level of glutamate outside of the brain cell. Low glutamate alternatives. Cheddar cheese. Cheddar cheese contains much less glutamate than Parmesan or Roquefort. Per 100 grams cheddar contains 180 milligrams of glutamate. Cod, mackerel, salmon. If you want to indulge in seafood, you are better off sticking to fish like cod, mackerel, or salmon. Spinach, cabbage, parsley, beets. Juicing. Oh my gosh. I could not close my pants because I was that kind of bloated. Very uncomfortable feeling to be in such a bloated body. And of course you don't function well. You feel drained. You feel brain fogged. You cannot concentrate. You don't understand the information that's coming in, or you have difficulty producing information, getting out. You have problems speaking. So I always thought it was the plant lectins, which may be true too, but all of these are high in glutamine. I wasn't aware of that. Beans are lectins. Peas are lectins. Lentils are lectins. All of that. That makes me super bloated. And these too. And as I said, after a so-called healthy meal with tofu and mixed organic vegetables and brown rice, I was so dead. I did not function. I had to rest, go to sleep for at least half an hour. Absolutely dead. And it caused me massive issues. So you see, basically it's all these foods that now people want to push onto you. This is a great website on MSG. Truthinlabeling.org. Hidden sources. Everyone knows that some people react to the food ingredient monosodium glutamate, MSG. Yeah, gives me migraines and brain fog, and it's just not good. So I avoid it where I can. What many don't know is that more than 40 different ingredients contain the chemical in monosodium glutamate, manufactured free glutamate. That causes these reactions. The following list has been compiled over the last 30 years from consumer reports and information provided by manufacturers. So maltodextrin is one that I also always reacted, and vinegar, cornstarch, dextrose, rice syrup, and of course soy sauce. So I stopped using all of these. But then you also have yeast. Recognizing or diagnosing MSG adverse reactions. Identifying MSG sensitivity is extremely difficult. Well, not really. If you have a direct reaction, instant migraine from eating some MSG, I think that would be quite clear. However, it's very important to differentiate that the glutes urge physicians to give allergy tests to people who might be MSG sensitive, knowing fully well that the MSG adverse reaction is a reaction to a toxin, not a reaction to an allergic substance, and as such is not IgE mediated. Traditional allergy tests only identify reactions that are IgE mediated. The only way to determine if a person is sensitive to MSG is to feed MSG, to that person and observe him for as long as 48 hours after feeding, or to have the person keep a record of food, pharmaceutical, cosmetic, and dietary supplement use and any MSG reactions. So, the following is a list of adverse reactions that might be MSG induced. Quite a lot. So, cardiac, circulatory, gastrointestinal, muscular, neurological, and that is the most important one, because you can be blamed for being depressed, having anxiety and all that. And then what they do, they give you medication for depression. But you could resolve that by just reducing MSG intake. We need to be aware of that. And there are visual, respiratory, urological, and skin. Bags under eyes. There you go. Well, as I was looking into the low glutamate diet, I had quite the epiphany. So this nutritional neuroscientist examines the negative effects of food additives on neurological symptoms, as well as the positive protective effects of certain micronutrients on the brain. The main focus of her research is on glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. This becomes dysregulated in many neurologic conditions, including chronic pain, migraine, multiple sclerosis, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Unfortunately, there are many foods that have glutamate. Typically, if you are a healthy person, you could eat lots of glutamate in your diet and it probably wouldn't affect you. We have what's called our blood-brain barrier that protects us from high levels of things that are circulating in our blood supply. What we notice is that the people tend to be sensitive to glutamate in the diet tend to be people who have conditions or something has happened that could have made that blood-brain barrier permeable. For example, head injury, infection, high amounts of stress. Ah, there you go. Glutamate is found in the diet in two forms. The first form is bound. This would be something like meat. If you're eating animal foods, all of that would have glutamate in it. The protein structure. It's all bound together in that big protein that does not appear to cause people problems. People eat meat with no problem. Where we see the problem is with free glutamate. If you've heard of the umami flavor, that's the taste of MSG. MSG is glutamate attached to one sodium molecule. The food industry loves glutamate, and it's added to a ton of products under a myriad of names. The majority of your exposure is through food additives. The exception to that are foods that contain free glutamate in high amounts naturally. This would be things like soy sauce, fish sauces, or seaweed, or tomato sauce. Aged cheeses would be another great example. As you age the cheese, it releases free glutamate as part of that process. So it is like a double whammy. If you have a nervous system that has been impacted in some way, so that there is a hypersensitivity and a leaky blood-brain barrier, and then if you're adding extra glutamate to the system, it will cause issues. So, of course, I tried GABA supplements, and it was an epic fail. Some licensed health professionals who want to dump more GABA into the system to offset glutamate. It's almost like using a supplement as a pharmaceutical where you're not changing or influencing the cause. What you're talking about is a systems approach to optimizing the nervous system. And, of course, I'm opposed to that idea. This is the same as a drug effect. When we take a drug and we take something that's GABAergic in any manner, what our bodies do is they say, that's too much inhibition from GABA. Let me put out more glutamate to balance everything out. Heh. Yeah, the body's clever. It does what it's supposed to do. Our bodies are all about that homeostasis. By doing dietary manipulation, what we're doing is we're helping everything calm down and go back to homeostasis. We're not putting something in that our body wants to oppose. That's what GABA does. It's the same thing if you drink alcohol. To be honest with you, alcohol is GABAergic. It has what we call GABA agonist. And as a GABA effect, what our body does is there's too much inhibition. We should release more glutamate to balance things out a little bit. People who have things like chronic widespread pain, or you'll hear people a lot who have insomnia, who will talk about the fact that if they drink alcohol, they notice that they're awake at night. The reason for that is, as the GABA effect wears off, their body has increased X-glutamate production, and it leads to insomnia in the middle of the night. There you go.
You need to have a balance between your electrolytes in your body. Neurotransmission, which is the nerve cells sending messages, happens because of charges which happen across the membrane in your cell. In other words, they keep fluctuating. So it's a little bit like different from regular electrical currents, although in a sense that is what neurons or nerve cells are supposed to do. They're supposed to distribute electrical currents. But in this case, this works by little like holes, or what they called ion channels, in the neurons, and they become charged, and like positive charge, negative charge, this kind of thing, keep fluctuating in charges, and that's called fluxes. And that's done by having the right electrolytes or charged particles in the right ratios going in and out. Complicated process, but let me just try to simplify. So that's why you need to have these things keep going in and out and in and out. And if you don't have that working well, there are all sorts of problems that can come if your ion channels are not working well, for example. That's one of the causes of sensory overstimulation. We may have congenital channelopathies, that those are diseases of the ion channel, and congenital means we're born that way, so it could be a genetic problem. We can also have acquired channelopathies, so you got sick in some way and it affected your ion channels. These channels are actually protein-filled, like little holes, and that protein is the channel. The protein is produced according to a recipe, which is made in your according to your genes contain the recipes for those ion channels. And if you've got genes that are a little bit funny, they're going to produce, they have a funny recipe for producing the ion channel, which is maybe not an ideal protein which it produces. So that's one potential reason why you may end up with sensory overload, because your ion channels are not ideal and are not passing the right things in the right ratios back and forth. And this, once again, this does not affect all autistic people, because autism is not a uniform condition which people have in various different degrees. It's actually a collective term for a bunch of different things, which from the outside may have some similarities. If you have a CBS gene mutation, for example, then you can have the problem processing thiols. Thiols are sulfur compounds, and taurine is one of them. So then you wouldn't want to have that. Because your body is making too much of it already, so then you would leave that. But for people who have problems with it, they will usually know by being sensitive to onions and cruciferous vegetables.
BH4 is extremely important as it helps regulate neurotransmitters and mood. So it's not psychological. Important to maintain an accurate level of BH4 in the body, as a lack thereof can lead to mast cell degranulation or mast cell activation disorder. Calcium channels. Research shows that the development of glutamate-induced brain cell death depends strongly on calcium channels in the brain. Excess calcium in the body and glutamate together can cause ongoing misfiring of neurons, becoming a vicious cycle resulting in neural inflammation and cell death. Excitotoxicity. Glutamate is the gun, while calcium is the bullet. So again, due diligence, do the research, dodge these bullets.